Welcome. Today I'm joined by Christopher Schaaf.
Hello.
Christopher is a recruiting specialist and he's a fellow expat. Not that we'll live in the same country, but as me, he has some time experience with living abroad, originally from Germany. And maybe that suffices for a short introduction. Please add some context so that we have a slight idea who my conversation partner is today.
Yeah, first of all, I have to add that I have been in Warsaw, at least for a brief period of time,
Yes.
To catch my flight back home. But kidding aside, I mean, we can go into detail how we know each other, but we know each other now for what, like over half a year, I think,
Yes.
8 months, around that. And I actually had to shift my view of myself prior to this conversation, because I realized that the past 3 years, I have not lived in my home country, Germany, longer than 3, maximum 4 weeks. So.
And you were not aware of this before our conversation?
No, I still had the self-image of me, like the next step in my life. In a couple of months, I'm like searching for apartment or a house, in Dortmund.
Yes.
And like settle. And then suddenly everything changed. And since then, I am basically a digital nomad.
Yes. Right. So in our prior conversations, and you're a client of mine, I guess we can say that it sometimes came up, and some of the ideas that you had were indeed to stay in Germany, but for now it again so happens that you found yourself abroad. So what were first? Maybe let's first move out of the way one of the wrong preconceptions that people have who have not lived abroad. When I guess this is a shared experience of the two of us, when we speak with locals in Germany or in other countries, and we tell them that we are either digital nomads or we are expats living abroad, I at least often hear the comment, "Wow, it must be so difficult to live in a country where you don't speak the language. It must be so difficult to organize with food and a flat and so on." And while it is a little bit of a challenge, I don't think that this is the most kind of difficult point for us. I mean,
No.
you have to organize a flat only once, and maybe after a couple of months or a year again. Shopping, you point fingers and pay currency. Nothing is easier than that. So it's not what many people imagine how kind of living abroad would be a challenge that the actual challenge is. And in fact, our conversation today is maybe to remove some of those preconceptions and share what our common experience is, both by ourselves and through people that we met. So why don't you share with us why you left Germany to begin with? At the beginning, maybe not with the idea to stay abroad for such a long time.
Not at all. Not at all.
What was the
It's
reason
actually.
to, for a short time at least, leave Germany?
It was actually a funny story, because, like I said, I thought I gonna the next step is gonna buy an apartment or a house, settle in Dortmund near the Phoenixsee, and then my girlfriend at the time broke up with me the third time, and this time it was like final. And I was pretty crushed. And you know that there are other things that are moving me and that I'm struggle with. And one of my best friends at the time, who I know since I'm 15 and who is like a brother for me, he has an e-commerce agency. So he works with e-commerce companies and helps them to increase their revenue, Facebook advertising, and so on. And he just booked a ticket for me to Las Palmas and said, okay, I have to get you out of Germany. You are so depressed, and you just fly here. I will take care of everything, and you will do an apprenticeship for me. And I am studied or educated in marketing, but I had just a general idea of online marketing, digital marketing. And so he flew me out to Las Palmas. I started working for him, and we figured, okay, this is amazing. I want to learn from him more. And a few weeks later, I was back in Germany. I stayed in Las Palmas for maybe a month. And
So
I
you
was
didn't
back in
take a
Germany.
lot of stuff with you. It was just a gig.
No, just a bag. And up to this day, I'm only traveling with with a backpack where my camera gear is in, my laptop, what I need for work, and then a bag for with a few shirts where I'm always trying to sneak it on the plane as hand luggage.
Yeah.
So, and my friend, so my motivation to work for him was to learn, because up till this date, I didn't have the ability to really help someone. I only had ideas and an understanding of concepts, but I didn't have the skill to actually help someone to actually do something. At least that's what I thought. So then my friend said, you know what? I'm gonna fly to Bali. I'm sick and tired of cold Germany. It was like November, beginning of December. I'm leaving. And I was like, damn, I want to learn from you. So the best thing I can do is sit next to you, look over your shoulder. And that probably means I will have to come to Bali as well.
Well,
And
what was your mindset at the time? Was it curiosity? Was it an adventure? Was it nothing special? Because
it was a big adventure, because I never been to Asia or anywhere else than the typical German travel destinations like France or Italy, Mallorca. And so it was a great excitement, because he has traveled Asia a couple of years ago all over, and it changed his life. And to imagine myself spending a couple of months in Asia, in Bali, and maybe in Thailand, we had some ideas, but nothing really planned, was crazy.
And so how many years is that ago? 3 years ago?
Yeah, 3 years ago now. Yeah, crazy.
Now, the mindset at that time, were you tired of Germany? Was there anything that you were looking forward to leave behind? Culture, language,
The weather,
food, weather, things like that?
the weather. I really, it was in November. I remember it so vividly. Like, it was raining all the time, and it was so depressing. And for me, the two things that I think living abroad allowed me to do is change the weather conditions to my liking and experience different cultures. I don't know how many of your listeners are Germans, and I don't want to offend anyone, but I do think
they're only the minority, don't worry.
I do think that we Germans have a very special culture. I can put it that way. Like, when I came back from Asia the first time, I was so confused why all people look so angry and depressed. And yeah, those are the two things I think. Being an expat or digital nomad or whatever you want to call it, like just being not at home, allows you to change. At least for me, that's the biggest part.
Let's stay with this point, because it's a very similar experience that I've had. My first longer trip was to Sri Lanka for 3 months, and I stayed in a monastery for meditation purposes. And when I returned, it was, now, to keep in mind, we both didn't go back to Berlin, which is maybe quite a special city, both culturally as well as kind of the intercultural aspect and the mix that there is in Berlin. So I came back to a place close to Frankfurt. You went back to Rhineland,
Solingen,
I guess. Yes.
Yeah.
So it's quite, rather typical, I would say. And also my impression was like, what is, just from it was the initial impression that I had going, to the supermarket and so on, my thought was, what is the specific reason that you have to be so mean-spirited, sad,
Yes.
inattentive? These were just some of the thoughts when I was pushing my cart through the supermarket, because I came back from a place. Now, Sri Lanka is, of course, it's a specific country in Asia, but it somehow fits in with Southeast Asia, South Asia. So it's not a very rich country, but the country is very fertile. And my impression was that people, in spite of the rather simple conditions that there were, not that they were all happy, but there was a vitality, at least, to people.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it. Like, especially what you say about being not a rich country.
Yeah.
The local, even though Bali is a very Eastern destination and everything, like most of the things are catered to the Eastern eye and Eastern taste. And the locals there, they don't earn much. There's still a vitality to them. They don't look like they hate you and their life. They're trying to make the best out of it.
Yes. And now let's reflect maybe a little bit deeper. Of course, it's not that you go to Germany, everyone hates you. There is a certain look, there is a certain appearance as if. And I would like to ask you, so let's consider the case that people don't want you any harm, that they don't, that they mean that they're rather neutral or okay, or just mind their own business. And that many people have a resting bitch face, as it's called. Now, if that is the case, and then people are not, actually grumpy, what do you think is the effect of people looking like as if they have a hard time or they are dissatisfied? What kind of an effect does it have on us who were locals in Germany? What kind of effect does an atmosphere like this possibly have on foreigners who come to live in Germany for family or work purposes?
I mean, for myself, I think we humans are heavily influenced by our surroundings, and just being surrounded by people who look sad, mean, angry, depressed, however we want to call it, a majority of the time is going to have an influence on your conscious and subconscious ways of thinking. And I think for locals or people who come to Germany, I had a similar experience when I went to Ukraine with my girlfriend. The first time, or the first time I came to Ukraine, I actually thought, like, why are all the people so angry? I remember the woman I bought my local SIM card off. I thought she hates me from the depth of her soul.
God.
It was, like if looks could kill. But the thing is that the environment is still new, and especially I think language plays a very important role, because especially in Ukraine, where I don't even understand the written language, or where it is difficult for me to figure out what is written somewhere, it is still a new impulse. And this changed how you perceive something, where we locals would think like, oh, everything is so depressing and sad and melancholic or whatever. Someone who is foreign has a lot of new and interesting stimuli.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So
Yes.
I think
yes.
what for us is
we observe in a very different way than locals.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, in a previous conversation a while ago, my conversation partners said something like, well, at least after a while in Poland, I learned to appreciate that people are more honest and authentic. And I think this is a misunderstanding. I think there's a different topic behind that, which is that when we come to a new place, or foreigners come to our place, that we simply don't know the code. And this is something that you just hinted at. We don't know what gestures mean. We don't know what a certain facial expression means, so that when we go to Thailand and everyone greets us with Savatika and is smiling, we think, oh, they're all genuinely nice people,
Yeah.
having no clue and no ability to differentiate between someone who is at the moment really happy and smiling because of that, or if they're just applying and executing the cultural code and
Yes.
are, deeply sad inside. We don't have the tools for that.
But for me, it does not matter.
Ah,
That is something I noticed. I mean, you gave the example of Thailand, and I think I visited Thailand as well for I think 2 months in 2.5 months overall, and the same goes for Bali and also places like Kuala Lumpur.
mhm.
And right now I'm actually in Dubai, and there are a lot of immigrants from Indonesia, from Pakistan, etc.
Yes.
And for me, it doesn't influence my experience and my well-being if someone just is and looks nice because they have to, and maybe
Mhm.
because they see me as a walking dollar sign, or if it's genuine, because I will experience and be surrounded by more happy looking and behaving people. And maybe this is a bit arrogant or selfish or self-centered. It makes me more comfortable.
Okay, so let me try a line of thought here. Maybe this is going somewhere. At the beginning, you mentioned one of your main motivations to go on this adventure is to have a say in which weather you are exposed to, with the implication that you're quite sensitive to the weather, and sunny and warmer weather brings you into a better mood. Now, is it possible to say that the cultural atmosphere, the way that people smile, react, look, uh, perform kindness, that it's something similar as the weather? Because the weather doesn't, I mean, it's snowing right now in Warsaw. It doesn't mean that the weather wants to do me any harm, or if it rains for days.
Yes.
So there is no kind of ill intent behind the weather, but it still affects me. I have to
Yes.
do conscious effort to think, oh, all the water is good for the nature. And it's nice that global warming is not that catastrophic, that every once in a while we have a stronger winter. This is something that I have to do intellectually if I'm not, a winter sport kind of person, where I have to tell myself, I have to relativize it for myself. Is it possible to draw a similar distinction there, so that even though it might be a cultural performance, still on an intuitive, unconscious level, I'm still positively affected by a culture that performs kindness and gentleness?
Absolutely. I love the comparison and the picture you're painting. And I, like, just when you talked, I had the thought, like, why would anyone choose to stay in an environment that he or she is not influenced positively for their
Yes.
own well-being?
Yeah.
Because right now you said, and I wanted to, actually, it's great that we can come back to that. You said there is no big issue being an expat or being a digital nomad or living abroad anymore. I think there is. One thing is language,
Mhm.
and it is English. Especially in my home country, Germany. Probably, I mean, we are talking English and it's an English podcast, so maybe not a lot of people have that issue.
Mhm.
But then you should be thankful for that you have a good understanding of the English language,
Yeah.
because that is crucial. That is the common link that allows us to go anywhere in the world, because we will find someone who speaks some English. Because yes, you have Google Translate and it is amazing, but
Mhm.
it is, that can make the experience really hard really fast if you
Yes.
have to translate everything.
Yeah.
And you cannot take part in social gatherings because what, you're going to type every joke you want to make. So language is a big thing. And then today we are able to everyone should understand that there's almost nothing that you care about in an area where you have competence and skills that you cannot digitalize right now. So even if you're an expert craftsman, like a carpenter, and you listen to this podcast right now and you think, oh, sounds quite nice. Maybe I want to go somewhere sunny, but then I don't have an income. Yeah, you might not have one as a carpenter, but A, if you understand English, and B, if you learn a little bit about things like online marketing, about coaching, about using the knowledge that you have to advise maybe other carpenters how to get better projects or better work, or how to manage the team, there is always something that you can digitalize and hence allow you to have the freedom to choose where you live.
Yes. So that would be a matter of faith in oneself, and to make the jump into the cold water and to shift one's experience from, in your example, actual crafting to, for example, teaching or advising. Yes. Right. You mentioned a couple of things there. For example, language. What I alluded to in the beginning was that it's that in conversations that people bring up, locals, they think the way that they think the problems are, or what they think the problems are not actually my problems. The real challenges go in the direction that you pointed out now. It's not that my lack of language skills would make it difficult for me to purchase something, right? This can be done easily. But yes, when it comes to language skills, it makes it difficult to connect with locals, and especially some locals that I might be interested in who are not so exposed to Western culture, and for example, English as a language, or in some rare cases, German or some other language that we speak. We might be interested in specifically that person, whoever that is, where they don't have the language skills, or we don't share a language that we can talk to, and then automatically we are cut off from someone that we have an initial sympathy towards, and that might limit our social reach. Now, in your years abroad, how much has that affected your social life, that you could not reach out to just anyone?
So in my time in Asia, it has not really, especially because I was there, the first time I was there with a group of friends, and it definitely did influence me. And I mean, you know that because you have to catch me when I feel sad and lonely and depressed, when I was in Ukraine. Because in Ukraine, there is, at least for me, surprising number of people who don't speak English.
Yes.
Like I was lucky through my girlfriend. I was introduced to a lot of people who are absolutely fluent, and where I don't have problem connecting, and they also helped me to connect with other people. But in just my experience with Ukraine, you cannot just talk to someone. There will be a high chance that they have no idea what you're talking about, because they don't speak more than 2 words of English. And this is, I think, the biggest drawback or potential for stress and harm when you are considering becoming an expert, digital nomad, etc. The danger of feeling isolated.
Yes.
Because it doesn't matter where you are. I felt horrible under the Balinese sun. I felt horrible under the Ukrainian snow. And it is often connected to feeling alone and isolated. And yeah, you mentioned you can find like maybe groups like German expats somewhere or whatever. But I think that this cannot fill the void of feeling unconnected, or maybe it can, but this is a real thing, that if you want to live happy or content somewhere else than the country where you grew up and you have relations and friends, I think in some way you have to think about, how can I engineer the experience of connectiveness? How can I engineer and create a circle of peers?
Okay, and here I have a question, because I see two possible influences here. One is that it would be important to be connected to the common local discourse, so that the hypothesis would be, in order to really feel well, I would need to feel at home. In order to feel at home, I would need to be able to connect with the concerns of normal people, the buzz on the street, what is generally going on. So the very general discourse. The other possibility would be, no, in order to feel secure and at home, I just need a handful of people who I really get along well with. The difference would be, if I live in a place with a big expat community, for example, in Bangkok or in other hubs in Asia, I might not be able to connect to the local discourse. I might not be interested at all in the local politics, unless it affects my stay in the country and the visa situation, for example. But I would find enough like-minded people, and it would not just be a random kind of circle of friends, but 2 or 3 good friends that I could find. And that would be enough to generate this homely feeling and not to feel disconnected. What do you think, in which direction would you take it? What is your experience? What are you looking for when you think about next destinations?
So I don't think there's a right or wrong, because it depends on being honest with yourself. What do you need? Me personally, and I have to clarify that because you spoke about the feeling being at home.
Yes.
I never had the feeling of being at home, and I was not searching it. And except you remember from our therapy sessions, anything else, it was pretty much okay for me, because I'm not trying to be at home. I did miss a home from time to time, but this is a small drawback from an overall great experience for me. But that might be totally different for someone who is actually an expat, so who is living in a place for longer. So for me, who I think the longest I stayed in one place was like 4 months. Oh no, I forgot that I had to stay in Bali for 10 months. Yeah, I'm always forgetting.
You're disqualified as a nomad. A nomad doesn't stay for 10 months.
Damn, cannot call myself that anymore. Yeah, but I personally think to have a small group of people you care about and who care about you, and where you can have shared experiences with. I think this is an important part. To open yourself up to really explore something. And that probably brings the first part of what you talked about in itself, that you will experience more and know more about the local situation, what is happening. And for me personally, I am interested in that, but more like knowing what is happening in Bali was interesting, but not important to me.
Yes. I will try to put that into concrete recommendations if we have listeners who contemplate to go somewhere to live, and try to find the right balance between adventure, which would be something very different than home, and kind of safety and connectedness. It might be interesting to consider to go to a place that indeed either has a large expat community, or where the local population is able to communicate rather freely with you, so that English would be, a second or third language at least. So there's a chance that every second or third person that you talk to in the street or in a cafe or something might be able to have a conversation with you, and not to go to rural China where people probably would have many more difficulties to communicate with you.
Yeah.
Because some people who contemplate this, indeed, they have a choice. They are just thinking, should I go on a Thailand island somewhere where they're used to expats and nomads being at home there? Should I go to Mongolia or Indonesia to have a more adventurous experience? And here, our tendency would be, if you're staying there for a longer time and you know from yourself that you might struggle with the feeling of connectedness, maybe for the beginning, for sure, try a safer option where you know you can find people to reach out to.
Absolutely. And I mean, depending on when you are listening to this, we all just experienced or still are experiencing the lockdowns or certain regimen in place to handle the situation, which in most countries and places of the world includes distancing from other people and having less contact. So I think we all learned through the past month or year how important human connection with people who you care about and who care about you really are.
Yes.
And I would really recommend to, before you go somewhere, join some Facebook expat groups. You can find that to almost any place in the world.
Yes.
I did that whenever I thought about going somewhere, starting from Las Palmas to when I wanted to go to Madeira, where I was supposed to be right now, but my flight got canceled, and now I'm with a friend and business partner in Dubai. Not too bad. I did that. I prior to my arrival, I went to some expat groups to at least have the option to meet people, to get a feel for how others are perceiving the place, what they might struggle with, what they're interested in, what I should know. And also maybe to visit a co-working space.
Yeah.
This is, I think, a great spot because you usually have both there. You have people who are like you, expats or digital nomads, and you almost always have locals working there.
True. Yeah, that's a very good thing and a good point, because I think nowadays, especially in the last few years, things have changed. Co-working spaces, of course, were available in metropolitan areas and big cities all over the world. And I think now they have reached even more exotic countries where in the bigger cities, you would find a possibility to visit a co-working space and rent a space or just visit on a daily basis. I would like to go to a point that you made previously and to extend that notion. You asked something like, why would I stay in a circumstance where I don't feel well, right? And you applied it to, for example, the country or the weather situation where you're at. I would like to extend that to more fields of life, because people struggle with this question. People stay, for example, in work environments that are not good for them. People are staying in relationships that are not good for them, and in cultures and so on. Often enough, it seems to be sufficient for it to be the known thing, so that many people seem to be wired in a psychologically in a conservative way, so that they just stick to what has been there before. We stick to the family routine, we stick to the culture, we stick to, the workplace that we have been, we stick to the unsatisfying relationship where we're at. And it doesn't seem to be kind of a healthy balance. Of course, there are people who have serious commitment issues and are just jumping around from one thing to another. But I think that most people kind of lean towards the too conservative and stay too long in circumstances that are not good for them. Now, my question to you is, when we move abroad and you have been staying mostly with your girlfriend abroad, now the kind of increased the difficulties of staying abroad, the nice aspects that we've talked about, and the difficulties of staying abroad. The difficulties of staying abroad create a certain tension in the relationship, regardless of not, regardless how the relationship actually is. It might be a good relationship, and still living abroad has certain stress factors that add on the relationship. Now, my rather complex question is, if I have a mindset of, I don't want to stay too long in negative circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I'm observing that while staying abroad, my relationship is exposed to stress. What is your experience? How can I find a good kind of reference point to know if the relationship, the work environment are worth it? Or if I'm experiencing a stress that is not just the environment, but also kind of a genuine relationship of me with my girlfriend, of me with my work, of me with the culture that I'm surrounded with. When is the right time to move from work, relationship, culture?
Yeah, well, so the number thing I do is wait for Fridays so we can talk about that.
Yes.
Yeah, this is indeed a very complicated question, and it is so difficult to answer that. I think one of the first things is to accept that you deserve a good environment or a good relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter if that is to accept that I deserve a good work relationship, a good relationship with my environment, with the people I'm surrounded, or with my partner.
Yeah.
And that there are things that to understand that there are things I don't know, and I'm really just thinking of what might help to make experiments. I don't. So you can do that with your
Yes.
work environment. So you can start a side project, start it as a hobby, just make new experience creating and doing something. You can do that with your location. So you can say, okay, I'm going to take a 2 weeks vacation or 3 weeks, or ask for a sabbatical or a
Yes.
time off or whatever. We actually have someone right here who is part of the business venture and who worked for a big telecommunication company in Germany on the B2B business, and who did that. He took a prolonged vacation to come here to Dubai with us and to experience a new location and also experience a new work environment.
Mm-hmm.
And he sent his pink slip like two days ago. So he's gonna quit. When it comes to relationships, I have no idea. This is so tough, and my girlfriend and I, we have both experienced that. We have experienced it when she came to Bali with me after only knowing me for like 2 months, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So we dated a month when I met her in Odessa, and then she visited me a week in Germany, and then I came for a month to Kiev with her. So we knew each other about 2.5 months, and then I said, okay, I'm going to escape the gnarly winter in Germany. I'm going to Bali with a bunch of my friends, and I want you to come with me. Luckily enough, she did, and I'm very grateful for that. But we had a struggle because I was surrounded by some of my best friends,
Mm-hmm.
and she didn't know anyone there.
Yeah.
And we later found out that there's a huge community for her in Bali, And in the end, I think she was better connected than I was. And like I'm absolutely amazed. Sadly, she thinks she's horrible at connecting with other people, while everyone loves connecting with her. And she was one of the most sought after photographer on Bali while she was staying there. But there was a lot of tension because of that, because I had the community, which we talked about is important, and she didn't.
Yeah.
And then the same happened, and I guess you remember that because we talked a lot about that when I was visiting her in Odessa, and I stayed for like 3 months.
Yeah.
And like I said, it is super hard to just connect with people because a lot of times they don't speak your language. And my Russian or Ukrainian is just good enough to order a beer and some shuba.
Yeah.
Maybe, I mean, what did I do? Like, not thinking of on top of my head, what did I do? I talked to my therapist, and I talked to my friends, and I tried to be open with my girlfriend and not put the pressure that I'm experiencing on her. So thanks to your help, I was able to realize that I need some kind of environment for myself, and I'm not having that enough. So I asked some of her friends who connected me with some of their friends. So I just had people with whom I can meet that are not friends of my girlfriend, and it's not an evening we are having together.
Yes. Okay.
Which is
Yeah,
just my personal story.
yeah, and there were some very valid points there. The first thing that I want to pick up is what you said, experimenting. I think that's a super important principle when we're thinking about real impactful change, right? So many questions that we touched upon are really difficult and impactful. To uproot myself, to go to a different culture, to a different country, different environment, different relationship, and so on. These are very forceful changes in my life. And we do have the possibility to experiment in many of these circumstances. Like you said, we can take a sabbatical, we can go on a slightly extended vacation to see how it is. Maybe I can use my normal vacation time, but not to go to the beach, but actually rent an Airbnb in the city of the town that I might be interested in, to get a feel a little bit for the place, to interact with expat groups, to ask for their impressions and advices. So I would give a lot of room to experimentation and to ask myself, how can I experiment in these fields? When it comes to relationship, I can really understand where you're coming from and as a principal point, because this is a field where I'm not quite sure. We are so intertwined emotionally in the relationship. It's probably very difficult to come to a clarity, just as with the German weather, for example. The German weather doesn't have an emotional relationship to me. In a certain way it has, but it's still an object. I can easily think, have the fantasy, I would like to lie on the beach and be in the sun somewhere. Personal relationships, it's much more complex, which means I will not have the sufficient clarity to, at the beginning already, to make a good choice. So what you said, and I can fully agree with that, I'm looking for sounding boards, right? Be it friends, be it therapy, be it people that I can talk to in general, family members, siblings, possibly. So what these conversations kind of do is they bring out something in me. I can hear myself generate more clarity while I talk to a sounding board, whoever that is, and to use that principle to generate a more sufficient basis for a possible decision. Also here, I would add, there is a certain possibility for experimentation. The basis for the experimentation is, and here I connect with another thing that you said, I basically allow myself to have a high expectation to my life, to think that I'm worthy of having a satisfying work situation, to live in a place that I like, to be with a person that is good for me. I allow myself that thought, that basic attitude. And here, a shout out to the late Robert Anton Wilson, who was a hippie philosopher and was hanging out with people like Tim Leary and so on in the 60s and 70s. From him, I learned that cultures go through shifts where there are times and decades of a generally shared low expectation and a generally shared high expectation.
Mm-hmm.
And this can influence people, and this can influence us. The generation that is growing up right now, there are some publications that point out that they are more risk averse than previous generations. There is less heavy drinking among youth. There is less unprotected sex. There's less drug use. Now, you would say these are good things. Yes, they are, but they're also hinting at young people not willing to make risks as much as in the past. It's not just about sex and drug abuse and so on. It's about many more aspects of life. One factor that this is attributed to is that there is a very high consciousness of being objects in social media, so that things are not going unnoticed anymore. People have a camera, people record stuff. I cannot just do risky stuff without anyone finding out. Or this is at least the mindset of many young people today, which would artificially keep them from trying out new things. But it's a more conservative kind of mental framework that they grew up with. So this would be an argument for maybe we're going through a time of lower expectations to a certain extent.
Yeah.
I think what we're both advocating is you have, even if you live in a time of low expectations, you have to shift that paradigm for you personally. It's important that we allow ourselves and we expect from ourselves a good life. Someone who has low expectations will put up with almost any work situation, with a horrible relationship situation, and so on. It seems to me that one of the determining factors is that people indeed say, no, I want something better for my life.
Yeah.
Be it income, work environment, relationship, whatever it is. And with that mindset, I get into experimentation. With that mindset, I get into trying new things. And when it comes to relationship, when I have the mindset of, I want something better than that, then obviously I look for ways to communicate with my partner in a better way, to interact in a better way. So I try things. I talk in a way or about topics that I have not talked before. I open up in a way that I have not opened up before. So here, this is what I would see as a transition from what you mentioned as kind of a field of experimentation in terms of culture, country, and work, and that we can apply a certain kind of similar mindset also to relationships.
This is super interesting, and I totally agree, and I would love to share a story about that. But after that, I would love to hear your opinion or how you think about the danger of becoming dissatisfied that goes with, at least in my mind, with the allowing myself to want to live a better life and be in better relationship and better vocation, because that is something is the flip side of this thought. But I would love to hear your thoughts on that. But before we maybe go into this topic, I just realized you talking about taking risks, seeing it as experiments. Basically, all my trips to different countries and stays were experiments. Because I know that I don't want to continue living as a digital nomad. And I never, and this is very important to clarify, I never intended to do so. I even thought about friends of mine who were doing it, like that sounds so weird, you know, not
Right.
to have your place and your stuff, and what, you only travel in a backpack, like how's that possible? And now I'm doing it for like over a year. But all my stays are to figure out, where do I feel good, where do I want to stay, and I'm searching for that. And during all of my stays in foreign countries, I had a moment of failure or insecurity, and almost like always also financially. There was the first time where I worked for my friend, and I didn't have enough commission. So I had 1 week where I ate cup noodles. Up till this day, I call it closer food, because after 5 days of cup noodles, you're really motivated to close a deal, because you won that commission. I broke my arm in Bali, and I couldn't cover the insurance cost, because my insurance was paying it, but in Bali you still have to pay the fee first, and my friend had to cover for me.
Yeah.
In all the times, just the last day in Odessa, I had a point where I used up all my resources, and I had to pick myself up, and I did, but it always happened. And at the end of all my trips, I came back to my mom, and that was, I felt every time like a failure, like, because I don't have my own apartment like everyone else my age does. I'm 28 now, and they're all settled and living, and and I come back to my home country, and I have to move, luckily not back in my old child room, but like I have to move back to my mom. So these are all experience to me, and that is something I realized you rephrasing and compacting it.
Yes. Right. Let me answer briefly to the question that you mentioned before, and then we can say our final words before we wrap it up. So you mentioned that there is inherent risk in having high expectation towards life, the risk of being dissatisfied. If I have constantly high and increasing expectations, it means that I'm not okay with things as they are, and I want to change them to the better, which again implies that I'm not really fine with the situation as it is. Okay, what is a way out of the solution of this dilemma? It's the structure of it is quite simple, because the high expectations that I apply, I do it also towards myself. So there are the high expectations towards a relationship with myself, and a high expectation towards relationship with my surrounding and other people. The latter, I have limited access to. I have to tweak it somehow, right? I have to manage people, relationships, trips, work, and so on. I have to somehow make it, which is some sort of a craft and an art. The relationship with myself, I have much more ways, much more many ways to influence that. I can work on myself. If I take that as the basis, I start out with high expectations. I realize, okay, that also means I want to have a good relationship with myself. And here's where I put a lot of the work in, and I progress in that. It means that I have always something to fall back to, right? So if I manage to be okay with myself, to like myself, to even when I'm alone and in rather difficult circumstances, maybe financially, maybe I feel isolated from others, and I'm still okay with myself so that I can spend time alone, then this is the fallback that I need in order to apply this mindset to situations outside, to circumstances outside. Which means, so I want to improve my work. Somehow it doesn't work for now. I have to be patient. I have to pull some strings over some months. There is ample possibility for dissatisfaction there and frustration, but I fall back to a kind, gentle, benevolent relationship with myself. which means I am able to exercise patience. I keep the future where it belongs, which is in a couple of months. There is a certain uncertainty there. I have all these things in mind while I'm pursuing this goal of improving my outside circumstances. During that time, I'm okay with myself. And this is something there is in the relationship with myself, there is a certain saturation possible. It's always possible to improve the relationship with myself, but at a certain point, I know I'm fine. And then that only, in quotes, has to be maintained. This is a task in itself to maintain that. But at that point, most of the work is done, and probably on the way there, I have acquired a lot of skills that help me to navigate the situation. If I have that as a solid basis, I think I can manage my pursuit of high expectation in the outside world without an accumulation of frustration and dissatisfaction. Does that make sense as an answer?
Absolutely. That was super, super interesting, and something I want to think and talk more about it. Luckily, we can. And I had a thought that it doesn't matter where you spend your time living this world. The first and most important thing is to be able to accept and love ourselves and find the satisfaction there. But I'm also super grateful that I'm able to do experiments on what outer environment and circumstances help me to feel better. Because as you remember our conversation on Monday, that actually can give me a stability to put more effort and attention to my inside.
Yes. Okay, let's have that as the final word. There were some threads that we didn't pick up on, but I'm very grateful for the conversation. I think we developed some interesting thoughts and touched upon some general or more abstract topics that are indeed relevant for prospect expats, digital nomads, or people who already live abroad. Any final words from your side?
I mean, yeah, thank you very much for having me. As always, it is absolutely amazing to have a conversation with you. Everyone who is considering maybe trying it out, I would recommend to do it. I think you can always come back. And for all the insecurities that come with it, you can shoot Gabriel a message, because he's a very good navigator to help you through these struggles, through my own experience.
Thank you very much, Christopher.
It's a pleasure.